Be me, Ava, HR Director. Today, reviewing resumes for our new software engineer position. Stack of qualified candidates on my desk. Notice immediately that about 70% are male applicants. Rolls eyes so hard they practically fall out of my head. Here we go again with the boys' club trying to infiltrate our progressive workspace. Decide to do what I always do. Create 2 piles. One for female candidates, one for male candidates. Female pile gets thorough review and consideration. Male pile goes straight into the thanks but no thanks category. This isn't discrimination, this is equity in action. Men have had their turn for literally centuries. Time for women to have their moment. Just finished tossing another male resume when Julian from accounting walks into my office. He's been here for about 5 years, decent enough worker, I suppose. But he has that entitled male energy that just grates on my nerves, always questioning processes, always thinking he knows better. Today, he looks particularly agitated about something. Ava, we need to talk, Julian says, closing the door behind him. What's on your mind, Julian? I respond, not looking up from my computer screen. It's about the hiring practices in this department. I've been noticing some concerning patterns. Here we go. Another man thinking he can lecture me about my job. The audacity is truly breathtaking. Concerning patterns? What exactly do you mean by that? Julian sits down across from my desk, his jaw clenched tight. I mean that in the past 18 months, every single new hire in engineering, marketing, and operations has been a woman. Every single one. I can hear the anger building in his voice already. Good. Maybe he's finally understanding how it feels to be on the outside. Time to educate this man on how the real world works. Julian, I'm not sure what you're implying here, but I hire the best candidates for each position. Period. The best candidates? Really? Because I happen to know that Thomas from my previous company applied for the senior analyst position last month. He has 10 years of experience and a stellar track record. Yet somehow Sarah got hired instead, despite having half his experience. The rage in Julian's voice is so obvious now. He's practically vibrating with frustration. Men just cannot handle not being the center of attention. This is exactly why we need more women in leadership. Julian, I'm going to stop you right there. First of all, it's completely inappropriate for you to be questioning my hiring decisions. Second, you seem to have some very problematic assumptions about qualifications and merit. Julian leans forward, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Problematic assumptions? I'm talking about objective qualifications, Ava. Years of experience, technical certifications, performance metrics. How is that problematic? Time to really break this down for him. Men need everything spelled out in simple terms. Because, Julian, what you call objective qualifications are really just reflections of a system that has historically favored men. When you say someone is more qualified based on years of experience, you're ignoring the fact that women have been systematically excluded from opportunities to gain that experience. So you're saying experience doesn't matter, that technical skills don't matter? I'm saying that true equality requires us to look beyond surface-level metrics and consider the bigger picture. Women bring different perspectives, different approaches to problem solving. That diversity of thought is more valuable than an extra few years of experience in a male-dominated industry. Julian's face is getting red now. He's so angry he can barely contain himself. This is what happens when you challenge male privilege. They literally cannot compute that the world doesn't revolve around them. Different perspectives. Ava, we're talking about coding abilities and data analysis skills. These are technical competencies, not philosophical viewpoints. Everything is political, Julian. Every hiring decision either perpetuates existing inequalities or helps to dismantle them. I choose to be on the right side of history. Julian stands up abruptly, pacing behind his chair. The right side of history? You're literally discriminating against qualified candidates based on their gender. How is that the right side of anything? Oh, now he's really showing his true colors, using the word discrimination like some kind of victim. This is exactly the kind of male fragility that holds society back. Julian, I'm going to need you to check your privilege here. Men crying discrimination when they don't get every single job they want is peak irony. You've had every advantage handed to you on a silver platter your entire life. Every advantage. Ava, I grew up in a trailer park with a single mother. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college. What advantages are you talking about? The advantage of being taken seriously in professional settings. The advantage of not having your ideas dismissed because of your gender. The advantage of never being asked to take notes in meetings or bring coffee. The advantage of male privilege. Julian is furious now, his voice rising. Good. Maybe some of this is finally sinking in. Men need to understand what it feels like to face barriers. So because I'm a man, my individual circumstances and efforts don't matter. My qualifications are automatically suspect. What I'm saying is that it's time for men to step aside and make room for others. You've had your turn. Now it's time for women to lead. Julian stops pacing and stares directly at me. Step aside. Ava, are you saying you won't hire men for open positions? Finally, he's starting to understand. This conversation is actually going better than I expected. Time to be completely honest about my approach. Julian, let me be crystal clear with you. In my role as HR director, I have made a conscious decision to prioritize female candidates for all open positions. This isn't about being anti-man, it's about being pro-equality. Prioritize female candidates? What does that mean exactly? It means that when I have a choice between a male candidate and a female candidate, I will always choose the woman. Always. Because that's what real change looks like. Julian's hands are clenched into fists now. He's absolutely seething with rage. Perfect. This is exactly the reaction I was hoping for. Men need to feel uncomfortable if we're going to make progress. Always choose the woman, regardless of qualifications. Julian, you're still thinking about this all wrong. When you've been conditioned by patriarchal systems your entire life, you don't even recognize real qualifications when you see them. Male-defined merit is just another form of oppression. Julian sits back down, but I can see he's still trembling with anger. So if a woman and a man apply for the same position and the man has better credentials, more experience, stronger technical skills, you'll still hire the woman every single time. Even if it means the company gets a less capable employee. This question reveals everything wrong with his mindset. The assumption that men are somehow more capable by default. The entitlement is just staggering. Julian, the fact that you automatically assume the male candidate would be more capable proves my point. You've internalized these biases so deeply that you can't even see them. I didn't say male candidates are automatically more capable. I'm talking about specific scenarios where one candidate has objectively better qualifications than another. And I'm telling you that your definition of objectively better is contaminated by centuries of patriarchal thinking. Real progress requires us to actively counteract those biases. Julian is quiet for a long moment, just staring at me. I can practically see the gears turning in his head, trying to process the reality that merit isn't everything, that sometimes justice requires uncomfortable choices. Ava, let me make sure I understand your position. You're saying that you will not hire male candidates, regardless of their qualifications, because you believe it's necessary to counteract historical discrimination? Finally, you're starting to get it. Yes, Julian, I have made a deliberate policy decision to exclude male candidates from consideration, because that's what equity looks like in practice. A deliberate policy decision to exclude male candidates? Absolutely, I'm not ashamed of it, Julian. I'm proud of it. Every woman I hire is a step toward balancing the scales of justice. Julian's anger has shifted now. Instead of hot rage, it's become this cold, calculating fury. He's looking at me like he's seeing me for the first time. Good. Maybe he's finally understanding the gravity of the situation. So, when you told the executive team last month that our hiring practices are based on merit and equal opportunity, you were lying? I wasn't lying, Julian. I was describing a deeper truth about what merit and equal opportunity actually mean in a systemically biased world. A deeper truth, Ava, you just admitted that you refuse to hire men regardless of their qualifications. How is that equal opportunity? Because true equal opportunity requires active intervention against existing inequalities. Passive neutrality is just another form of complicity. I can see Julian processing this information. His anger is morphing into something else now. Maybe resignation, maybe understanding. Either way, this has been a productive conversation. Julian stands up again, but this time his movements are more controlled. Ava, I need to ask you one more time, just to be absolutely clear. You have a policy of not hiring male candidates. I have a policy of prioritizing qualified women over qualified men, yes. And before you ask, no, I don't consider that discrimination. I consider it justice. And this is something you've been doing consistently since you became HR director. Consistently and intentionally. It's one of the things I'm most proud of in my career. Julian nods slowly, like something has finally clicked. Maybe he's starting to see the bigger picture. Maybe he's beginning to understand his role in perpetuating inequality. Thank you for being so honest with me, Ava. This has been very enlightening. I hope it has, Julian. Real change requires difficult conversations like this one. After Julian leaves, I feel energized in a way I haven't in months. Finally, someone is asking the right questions. Even if he was angry, at least he was engaging with the real issues. Most men just stick their heads in the sand and pretend everything is fine. Spend the rest of the day feeling productive and purposeful. This is why I took this job, to make a real difference in people's lives, to create opportunities for women who have been overlooked for too long. 2 weeks later, Julian requests another meeting. Honestly surprised he wants to continue the conversation. Most men would have just gone back to their cubicles and sulked. Maybe he's more mature than I gave him credit for. Julian walks into my office again, same serious expression. Ava, I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation. Oh, what conclusions have you reached? I'm still struggling with some of the things you said. Can we talk through a few specific examples? Here we go again. Men always need everything explained multiple times, but at least he's making an effort to understand. Of course, Julian. What would you like to discuss? Well, take the marketing coordinator position we filled last month. I happen to know that David applied for that role. He has 5 years of marketing experience at Fortune 500 companies, an MBA in marketing, and a proven track record of successful campaigns. And Emma got hired instead. She's obviously intelligent and capable, but she just graduated college and has no professional marketing experience. Julian's anger is building again. I can hear it in his voice, see it in his posture. Men just cannot accept that their credentials don't automatically entitle them to jobs. Julian, this is exactly what I was talking about before. You're reducing people to resume bullet points instead of considering their full potential. Their full potential? Ava, marketing requires specific skills and knowledge that come from experience. How is someone with no experience going to manage a 6-figure advertising budget? Emma brings fresh perspectives and innovative thinking that David, with all his traditional experience, simply couldn't offer. Julian's voice gets louder, his frustration obvious. Fresh perspectives? She's never run a marketing campaign in her life. She doesn't know how to negotiate with vendors, manage budgets, or analyze market data. These aren't perspectives, they're fundamental job requirements. Julian, you're doing it again. You're assuming that male-dominated industry experience is somehow more valuable than alternative forms of knowledge and insight. Alternative forms of knowledge? Ava, we're talking about technical competencies. He's getting so worked up over this. Classic male reaction when their worldview gets challenged. Time to help him see the bigger picture. Technical competencies that have been defined by male-dominated industries to favor male candidates. The whole system is rigged, Julian. The system is rigged? Or maybe some jobs actually require specific skills and experience. Every system that produces unequal outcomes is rigged by definition. If traditional hiring practices consistently favored men, then those practices were fundamentally flawed. Julian slams his hand on my desk, his anger now fully unleashed. So the solution is to flip the script and consistently favor women instead. How does that solve anything? Because historical wrongs require active correction, not passive neutrality. Active correction, Ava, you're talking about deliberately hiring less qualified candidates based on their gender. How is that correction? The entitlement is just breathtaking. He genuinely believes that men deserve jobs more than women. This is exactly why we need policies like mine. Less qualified according to whose standards, Julian? Standards created by and for men. Standards like education, experience, technical skills, and performance metrics. Are you seriously arguing that those don't matter? I'm arguing that they matter less than diversity and inclusion. Julian stares at me in disbelief, his face red with rage. Diversity and inclusion matter more than competence, more than ability to do the job? In the long run, yes. A diverse workforce will always outperform a homogeneous one, even if individual hires seem less qualified on paper. Less qualified on paper? Ava, we're talking about real-world skills and capabilities. Julian is absolutely furious now. Exactly the kind of reaction I expected. Men simply cannot handle losing their privileged position. Julian, I think you need to step back and examine why you're so emotionally invested in maintaining the status quo. Emotionally invested? I'm concerned about the company hiring the best possible candidates for each position. The best possible candidates according to biased metrics designed to favor men. Biased metrics, like relevant work experience and demonstrated skills, like metrics that systematically undervalue the contributions and potential of women. Julian goes quiet for several minutes. I can see him trying to process everything. Maybe some of this is finally getting through. Change is never comfortable, especially for privileged groups. Ava, let me ask you something else. What about legal liability? What do you mean? I mean, aren't you worried about discrimination lawsuits? If someone can prove that qualified male candidates are being passed over because of their gender, now he's trying to scare me with legal threats. Typical male intimidation tactic when logical arguments fail. Julian, discrimination law is designed to protect historically disadvantaged groups, not to preserve existing inequalities. Actually, Ava, discrimination law protects all groups. Title VII specifically prohibits employment discrimination based on sex, regardless of whether the victim is male or female. Legal technicalities aside, no court is going to side with men claiming discrimination in a historically male-dominated industry. Legal technicalities, these are fundamental civil rights protections. Julian's anger is reaching new levels. He's practically shaking with rage. This conversation is really getting to him. Julian, I think you're missing the forest for the trees here. We're talking about social justice, not legal technicalities. Social justice? Ava, you just admitted that you have a blanket policy of not hiring men. How is that justice? It's justice because it addresses centuries of systematic exclusion of women from the workforce. By systematically excluding men from the workforce, by creating space for women to finally have the opportunities they deserve. Julian stands up and starts pacing again. His fury is palpable. Good. Maybe he's starting to understand what it feels like to be marginalized. Ava, do you realize what you're saying? You're admitting to systematic discrimination against an entire group of people based solely on their gender. I'm admitting to systematic correction of historical injustices. That's not correction, that's revenge. It's not revenge, Julian. It's equity. Julian stops pacing and looks directly at me. Equity? You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Equity means providing different levels of support to different groups to achieve equal outcomes. Equal outcomes achieved through unequal treatment? Exactly. Julian stares at me like I've grown a second head. Men really struggle with complex concepts like equity and justice. They're so used to everything being handed to them. Ava, let me make sure I understand your position completely. You believe it's appropriate to discriminate against male job candidates in order to achieve what you consider equitable outcomes? I believe it's appropriate to prioritize female candidates to counteract historical discrimination. And you're comfortable with the fact that this means qualified men won't be hired. I'm comfortable with the fact that qualified women will finally get the opportunities they deserve, even if those women are less qualified than the men you're rejecting, even if those women have been systematically prevented from gaining traditional qualifications by a biased system. Julian nods again, that same calculating look in his eyes. Maybe he's finally starting to see the bigger picture. Understanding injustice requires intellectual honesty. Thank you again, Ava. This has been very educational. I hope it helps you understand why change is so necessary. After Julian leaves, I feel even more confident in my approach. These conversations are exactly what we need more of. Even angry men engaging with social justice issues is progress. At least he's not just dismissing everything outright. 3 more weeks pass. Notice Julian has been acting strange lately, more quiet than usual, keeping to himself. Probably still processing our conversations. Change is never easy for people in privileged positions. Then, one Tuesday morning, I get a call from Rebecca, our CEO. Ava, I need you in the conference room immediately. Her tone is unusually serious, probably wants to discuss the diversity metrics I've been tracking. Walk into the conference room expecting a routine meeting. Instead, find Rebecca, Thomas the CFO, and David from legal all sitting with grave expressions. Julian is there too, looking oddly calm. Immediately sense something is wrong. Ava, please have a seat, Rebecca says. Julian has brought some very serious allegations to our attention. Look at Julian with confusion. What could he possibly be alleging? Our conversations were private and completely appropriate. I'm not sure what Julian thinks he's alleging, but I'm happy to address any concerns. Rebecca slides a small recording device across the table. Julian has provided us with recordings of conversations he had with you regarding your hiring practices. My blood runs cold. Recordings? When did he record our conversations? This feels like a complete violation of trust. Recordings? Rebecca, I had no idea Julian was recording our private conversations. That seems highly unethical. The ethics of the recordings aside, Ava, we need to address the content. Julian, please play the relevant portions. Julian presses play on the device. Suddenly, my own voice fills the room. I have made a deliberate policy decision to exclude male candidates from consideration. Every woman I hire is a step toward balancing the scales of justice. I will always choose the woman. Always. Feel my face burning with embarrassment and rage. This was a private conversation, taken completely out of context. Julian manipulated me into saying things that sound worse than they are. Rebecca, those statements need to be understood in their proper context. Julian and I were having a philosophical discussion about equity and justice in hiring. Thomas leans forward, his expression stern. Ava, you clearly state that you have a policy of excluding male candidates. There's no context that makes that legally defensible. I was explaining the principles behind equitable hiring practices. The goal is to create opportunities for historically marginalized groups. Julian speaks for the first time. Since I entered the room, his voice cold and controlled. Ava, you specifically told me that you refuse to hire men regardless of their qualifications. You said you do this consistently and intentionally. Julian's anger from our previous conversations has transformed into something much more dangerous. Calm, calculated, purposeful. He planned this entire thing. Julian, you're twisting my words. I was trying to help you understand complex issues around workplace equity. Rebecca holds up her hand. Ava, let's listen to another section. Julian fast forwards and plays another clip. When you say someone is more qualified based on years of experience, you're ignoring the fact that women have been systematically excluded. True equality requires us to look beyond surface-level metrics. Even if those women are less qualified than the men you're rejecting. Even if those women have been systematically prevented from gaining traditional qualifications. David from legal takes, Notes as he speaks. Ava, these recordings clearly document systematic discrimination based on gender. This creates enormous legal liability for the company. David, discrimination law is meant to protect marginalized groups, not preserve existing power structures. Actually, Ava, Title VII protects all employees from discrimination based on protected characteristics, including sex. This applies to men as well as women. Realize I'm in serious trouble here, but these people just don't understand what we're dealing with. Systemic change requires uncomfortable choices. Look, everyone, I understand this sounds problematic when taken out of context, but we're talking about addressing centuries of workplace inequality. Sometimes progress requires difficult decisions. Rebecca's voice is firm. Ava, progress cannot come at the expense of legal compliance and basic fairness. These recordings indicate that you've been systematically violating company policy and federal law. I've been following the spirit of our diversity and inclusion initiatives. Thomas shakes his head. The spirit of our initiatives is equal opportunity for all candidates, not exclusion based on gender. Julian is just sitting there watching this unfold. His earlier anger has been replaced by quiet satisfaction. He planned this entire confrontation. Julian, I trusted you. We had private conversations about complex social issues, and you violated that trust by secretly recording me. Julian finally shows some emotion, his anger returning. You trusted me. Ava, you admitted to systematic discrimination that has affected dozens of qualified candidates. You violated their trust, not mine. I was trying to create opportunities for women who have been historically excluded. By excluding men who had nothing to do with historical discrimination. Rebecca stands up, her decision clearly made. This whole thing has spiraled completely out of control. Ava, based on these recordings and the clear violations of company policy and federal law they document, we're terminating your employment effective immediately. The room spins around me. This cannot be happening. Everything I've worked for, destroyed by a vindictive man who couldn't handle being educated about social justice. Rebecca, you can't be serious. I've transformed this company's hiring practices. We have more diversity now than ever before. Diversity achieved through illegal discrimination is not acceptable, Ava. It's not illegal discrimination, it's equity. David from legal closes his folder. Ava, refusing to hire qualified candidates based on their gender is textbook employment discrimination. The recordings make this impossible to deny. Julian is still staring at me, his anger finally subsiding into something like pity. The audacity is just unbelievable. Julian, you've destroyed everything I was trying to build here, all the progress we've made for women in this company. Julian's voice is steady but still carries traces of his earlier fury. Ava, progress built on discrimination isn't progress at all. It's just discrimination with better marketing. You don't understand what you've done. You've set back women's advancement by years. No, Ava, you set back women's advancement by making it impossible to distinguish between merit-based diversity and gender-based discrimination. Rebecca escorts me out of the building within the hour. 3 years of meaningful work undone by a man who couldn't accept change. This is exactly why we need more women in leadership positions. Men simply cannot handle losing their privileged status. Sitting in my car in the parking lot, Julian walks past, heading to his car, rolls down my window, and calls out to him. Julian, I hope you're satisfied. You've just reinforced every barrier that women face in the workplace. Julian stops and walks over to my car, his anger flaring up one final time. Satisfied? Ava, I'm not satisfied. I'm furious that it came to this, but I'm more furious that qualified people were denied opportunities because of their gender. Qualified people? You mean qualified men who couldn't handle a little competition? I mean qualified people, period, including women who now have to live with the suspicion that they were hired for their gender rather than their abilities. Julian walks away, leaving me sitting alone, completely bewildered by how this all went so wrong. Everything I did was in service of justice and equality. Yet somehow, I'm the one being punished. Drive home in shock. 3 years of progress destroyed in a single morning. All because I was honest about what real change requires. This is exactly why systemic inequality persists. People aren't willing to make the hard choices necessary for true justice. Spend the rest of the day reflecting on everything that happened. Julian's recordings were taken completely out of context. He manipulated me into having frank discussions about complex social issues, then used my honesty against me. The more I think about it, the more convinced I become. This was never about hiring practices or legal compliance. This was about a man who couldn't handle being challenged, who couldn't accept that his privileges were being questioned. So he destroyed the woman who dared to speak truth to power. Julian may have won this battle, but the war for workplace equality continues. Somewhere else, another woman will take up this fight. And maybe next time she'll be smarter about who she trusts with the truth.